1973. We all moved here in 1970, came here as £10 Poms, and at the time there was lots of jobs going for doctors around Australia, and Dad was offered lots of positions all around, different places in northern New South Wales and Queensland and more, and he went on tour to visit them all and decide where to settle. And whenever he got to a place, he would ask one question, and he would say, "How often does the sun shine here?" Because he grew up in Glasgow in the rain and sleet, and he just was looking for sunshine. And so when he got to Whyalla, and he said to people, "How often does the sun shine here?" And everyone said, "Every day of the year." So that's how we ended up living in Whyalla. He loved the sunshine, and he called himself a climate refugee. He loved the heat, and he even loved 40 degrees, and he would have loved it today, for example. But it wasn't just the weather. He also chose Whyalla because as a doctor he wanted to serve the community. He felt very strongly that people who lived in rural areas should have access to the same medical care that people have in big cities. He was devoted to serving the town. He always said, the main thing he always used to say that he wanted to do was to be useful. He just wanted to be useful. After years of moving here, Dad became an Australian, and despite his thick Glaswegian accent, he was pretty proudly called himself an Aussie. And but not only was he proud to be Australian, he was proud of his hometown of Whyalla. Don't know if you ever phoned our house, but he always used to answer the phone, "Hello, my name is Croall and I live in Whyalla." And the phone was ringing a lot because generally it was the hospital asking him to come and deliver a baby. By the time my dad retired, he delivered about 3 generations of babies in Whyalla. The babies and the mothers of the babies, and in a few cases towards the end even he delivered the grandmother of the babies. And when Dad wasn't delivering babies, he was out planting trees. On a day like today, he'd be out in his boiler suit, digging holes in the full sun, planting trees. And over the last 40 years in Whyalla, he planted, thousands and thousands of trees. A couple of thousand of them are out of the golf course. They were always Australian natives, gums, wattles. And every single one of them was a tree that he'd grown from seed himself. And when we were kids, he used to drive through the streets of Whyalla. If he saw a gum tree that he liked, he'd slam on the brakes and say, just climb in that garden and grab a seed pod off the tree. And if we refused, he'd say, "Oh, I'll do it myself." And he'd leap across the road, and he'd always click his heels as he skipped across the road or something, and go flying over the fence and up the tree and grab a seed pod. And then he'd bring them home and he'd cook them in the oven and warm them up to germinate them and get them growing in the old dog food tins in the garden. And then, so when they were ready, he'd plant them out in the bush all around Whyalla and all around the golf course in remote places with no taps. And so once they were planted, he had to fill buckets every day, fill up buckets of water and drive them out to places and pour them lovingly on his baby trees. The car suffered a fair bit. His love of gum trees didn't just stop at planting trees. He made a lot of tables out of gum trees, especially red gum. He loved making red gum tables, and his tables stay with us as precious meeting points for us all now. We all have one in our house. Dad also made a lot of stone walls. You might have seen him over the years driving around Whyalla, collecting rocks, and he might have stolen some from your, whenever he did a renovation or something. He was filling up trailers and bringing them back to our house and then just cladding the house with rocks. Dad was always wearing a boiler suit, whether it was for planting trees or woodwork or stonework. The phone would ring and off he'd go to the hospital in his boiler suit. And so, people probably thought he was quite mad, but one thing that my dad always instilled in us was never worry about convention, just be yourself, be an individual. Hello, my name is Croall. He said, don't worry about snobby rules or pompous office rules and just have a laugh and have fun. And he loved unusual people, and he liked outsiders, and he liked entertaining, really. He would never walk down the hospital corridor. He'd have to run down like an aeroplane, or bowl his keys down like the cricket pitch, or leap up and header an imaginary soccer ball. Or sometimes he'd actually ride his rickety old bicycle right up to the patient's bed. When the maternity ward was on the ground level, he used to break in through the windows and have a bunch of flowers and give it to the patient in the bed to try and cheer them up. One of the nurses once told us that one of the first times she met my dad was he was crawling on all fours in the corridor of the hospital with a white sheet over him. And she said, "Are you all right, Dr. Croall?" And he said, "Shh, I'm a trolley." So he was trying to lighten up the hospital. And who could forget his broken glasses, always with one lens missing, and the other lens held together with band-aids and masking tape. Often when he met people for the first time, he would ask them to read aloud from Dickens or Shakespeare. We used to, as teenagers, bring friends home, and I'm so embarrassed that he would open a book to them and say, "Read this to me." When? Now, read it out loud now. He loved books, and he wanted people to read more books. And we sort of thought Dad was pretty much what you see is what you get. But when I was about 17 years old, I went to Scotland and to meet all my old relatives. And it was there that I first saw photos of my father dressed in robes at the Vatican. And I asked my auntie, what's this? Like, what is this photograph? And she said, "Oh yes, well, didn't you know that when your dad was 16, he'd gone to live in Rome to train for the priesthood?" And he'd never told us at all. But it turns out Dad lived many years in Rome in the late 40s and early 50s, studying to become a priest. But he didn't quite work out. He left Rome at 21 and changed course and studied medicine. I think he, as a student, he ran amok. There's a lot of stories that we won't share here now. A little party animal, I think. But he played a lot of sport as well. He always loved sport. I mean, he was so happy in his last few days with us last week to watch the Aussies thrashing the Poms. He was very happy with that. He loved Mitchell Johnson taking all the wickets. And he loved golf. And he spent hours teaching us when we were young how to swing a golf club. And he always had tips for everything, and the tip was keep your front arm straight. Actually, when we were young and he saw my friends smoking, he said, "Don't smoke those ones in the packets, I'll teach you how to roll." And he said, "Keep your fingers straight." And so if you play golf, it's keep your arms straight. And if you want to roll a good cigarette, keep your fingers straight. But one of the things that probably everybody remembers about my dad is the way he flew about in his old Volvo. He was the ultimate Volvo driver, never indicating, taking up 4 lanes as it swung around a corner. He particularly loved reversing everywhere. When I made a short film about Volvo drivers years ago, I asked him if he thought people abused him because he was in a Volvo. He said, "People yell at me no matter what car I'm driving." But he was very proud to say that he had never had an accident going forwards, only ever had accidents going backwards. He pushed that old Volvo to the limit and it was really falling apart. Years of driving around the bush, planting trees, sloshing water in it and everything. It was a wreck. So when the police finally defected his Volvo, he was indignant. He said, "There's nothing wrong with that Volvo. The only thing was there was a little bit hanging off the bumper. And apart from that, it was perfect." The policeman didn't agree. But one thing about my dad, people just always loved talking to him, and he was great company, he was very funny, and he was always interested to know what you thought. He would always have deep philosophical conversations with you if you had the time, and maybe it was all those years of prayers in Rome, but he was a deep thinker. One thing he always told us is be kind to everybody. He was a very generous and kind man, and he was an amazing father and beautiful grandfather. He wasn't soft, he was quite strict, but he did always encourage us to be an individual. And he was very proud of his children, my sister and my brother and all the grandchildren. My dad loved reading. He loved humour in books, and he loved reference books, he loved atlases, he loved dictionaries. He was constantly looking things up, and he loved cryptic crosswords. Mum and Dad did the cryptic crossword every weekend. It was one of the many things Mum and Dad did together as a team. Mum and Dad were a rare union. They loved doing things together. Mum even worked with Dad running surgery as a receptionist, and then they'd go out and play golf almost every day. They used to go out for a few holes of golf, and then they'd come together each evening at the dinner table, the big dinner table that my dad built, and full of chat about their adventures that day, always talking and politics of the world. And it was like they hadn't seen each other for ages, but they just saw each other a few minutes ago. But they were an incredible team for more than 50 years. And on the morning Dad died, we were with him, we were beside him, and Mum had her arms around him and she kissed his forehead just at the moment that he passed away. So she was with him till the very end. And she will miss him, and so we will all miss him.